I'm Nick. Here's your global intelligence briefing. The Middle East may be dominating the headlines. Long-range drone strikes between Russia and Ukraine may be getting all the attention. But while the world was looking elsewhere, something happened on the battlefield that almost no one expected. A Russian offensive that had been stalled for months suddenly broke through on a broad front. Within just 2 days, Russian forces pushed deep into Ukrainian defensive lines near Orikhiv, advancing nearly 10 kilometers and reaching fortified positions that had resisted assaults for more than a year. At the same time, another Russian breakthrough threatened to encircle key Ukrainian strongholds from a different direction. If these reports prove accurate, the battle for Zaporizhzhia may have entered an entirely new phase. Today, I'll explain what happened, why military analysts were caught off guard, and how these developments could reshape the strategic picture across the southern front. The forces of General Teplinsky, the same units we previously discussed as being unable to achieve significant progress and struggling to stop Ukrainian attacks in the area of Primorsky Plavny and toward Kamenka, suddenly made a major move. Reports emerged that Russian forces had broken through the Ukrainian front line across a wide section and were moving from the southwest of Orikhiv toward the north. They advanced up to 10 kilometers deep into Ukrainian territory, reaching defensive belts, strongpoints, and fortified positions that had been the objective of Russian attacks last year. These were the same positions from which Ukrainian forces had previously managed to push Russian troops back. What makes this development especially significant is the speed. The breakthrough reportedly happened in only 2 days. At the same time, on another section of the front northeast of Orikhiv, forces under General Ivanev also broke through Ukrainian defenses. They reached the Verkhnya-Tersa River area, creating a pincer movement and nearly surrounding the village of Dolinka. This village represents the last major Ukrainian defensive position between the Verkhnya-Tersa River and the positions that Ukrainian forces previously held while attempting to fight around Heliopol. If you look at the map, the situation becomes clear. Russian forces are advancing from 2 directions, bypassing Orikhiv instead of attacking it directly. And if this offensive succeeds, Orikhiv could find itself in a deeply exposed position, surrounded on 3 sides, or possibly even more. In other words, it could become another Konstantinivka-style battlefield. The city could be isolated, pressured from multiple directions, and eventually forced to fall. Russian forces have already taken control of around 20 Ukrainian towns and have won numerous battles. What is happening on the southern front follows a classic military approach, creating the conditions necessary to destroy and push enemy forces out of a major strategic settlement. Over the past several years, Ukraine has transformed Orikhiv into one of its strongest fortified positions. Taking it with a direct frontal assault proved impossible. The battles around Mala Tokmachka became a symbol of those failed attempts. But the Russian response to those battles appears to be different. The strategy is not to storm Orikhiv head-on. Instead, the goal is to surround it, leaving Ukrainian forces what military planners often call a golden bridge, an opportunity to withdraw before complete destruction. We have seen similar situations before in places such as Sudza in the Kursk region, Avdiivka, Velika Novosilka, Volodar, Heliopol, Konstantinivka, and now potentially Lyman. The pattern remains the same. Ukrainian forces lose their positions, and the settlement eventually falls. How long this process will take is still unclear, but these developments are extremely significant. Few expected Teplinsky's forces to suddenly launch such a powerful offensive. What appears to have happened is that Russian forces spent a long period quietly, preparing and transferring additional troops toward the Dnipro military grouping. Only now have these preparations become visible. During this time, Ukrainian forces continued their own advances toward Kamenka, but at an increasing cost in personnel and equipment. Then Russian forces launched their offensive, almost directly next to the area where Ukrainian troops were attempting to move. Along the Dnipro River coastline, the attack is developing between Stepnohursk and Orikhiv. As a result, the entire Orikhiv fortified area has been placed in an extremely difficult position. The fighting is now taking place along old Ukrainian defensive positions that changed hands during the battles of 2025. Earlier this year, Ivanayev's forces had already reached these fortifications. But those attempts were unsuccessful and they were pushed back. Now the situation has changed. While Teplinsky's forces are approaching Orikhiv from one direction, Ivanayev's troops are moving toward it from another. This could dramatically intensify the battle. Overall, this Russian offensive appears to have surprised military analysts and, judging by the situation, possibly the Ukrainian command as well. The reason is that Ukrainian forces are still continuing offensive actions slightly east of this area, in the southern Donetsk direction. However, that Ukrainian operation has now turned into a classic infiltration tactic. Small Ukrainian assault groups are attempting to move deeper behind Russian positions. At the same time, Russian forces continue holding strong defensive lines along the former front line. Ukrainian units are moving through rear areas along the Vovcha River. They are using forest belts and natural terrain to infiltrate deeper. A similar situation already occurred in the spring of this year near Zaporizhzhia. At that time, Ukrainian forces managed to advance significantly, but the units that were supposed to follow them, clear Russian defensive positions, and eliminate remaining garrisons never arrived. The troops that moved too far forward were eventually defeated and suffered heavy losses. During that offensive, there were cases where entire battalions were reduced to only a handful of soldiers. In one case, 4 people. In another, around 10. Now we will see how the current operation develops. But most likely, Ukraine may be forced to stop what has become an ineffective southern Donetsk offensive. The reason is that the situation near Orikhiv has changed dramatically. Orikhiv is the key to Zaporizhzhia, and Zaporizhzhia itself is already under constant drone and aerial bomb attacks. The city has begun installing anti-drone protection networks and preparing for possible defensive operations. It is entirely possible that if Russian forces succeed in the battle for Orikhiv, they could reach the outskirts of Zaporizhzhia by the end of the year. There is even a possibility that they could begin an assault on the city itself. As I have said before, I have always considered an offensive toward Zaporizhzhia to be strategically more important than continuing the costly fighting over the remaining parts of Donbass. Capturing Zaporizhzhia would change the outcome of the war much faster than taking cities such as Kramatorsk or Sloviansk. Meanwhile, in the Kramatorsk and Sloviansk area, Russian forces continue large-scale offensive operations. They are advancing from the south, from the direction of Konstantinivka, and also pushing directly from the east towards Sloviansk and Kramatorsk. Russian forces have already moved beyond Konstantinivka, although Ukrainian sources still list the city as under Ukrainian control. The situation on the ground has changed significantly. Ukrainian troops have largely withdrawn, leaving only small groups attempting to maintain a presence and record footage showing that they are still there. A similar situation was previously seen in Pokrovsk and Myrnohrad, where small groups continued appearing in videos. Despite the broader military situation, now Russian forces have begun assaults toward Oleksivo-Drushkivka. Ukrainian units have moved back to the northern outskirts of the settlement. There is an industrial zone there, and Ukrainian forces are concentrating their defenses in that area. The heaviest fighting is expected around this industrial zone. The rest of Oleksivo-Drushkivka has effectively become a gray zone. Both Russian and Ukrainian assault groups can enter these areas, but neither side has established full control. This is the southern direction of the offensive. Russian forces are moving forward. At the same time, new reports indicate that Russian attacks are intensifying directly toward Kramatorsk and Sloviansk. According to these reports, assault groups have entered the territory of the Sloviansk power plant, where fierce fighting continues to erupt. They are gradually advancing in the direction of Kramatorsk. The tactics remain the same. First come reconnaissance and sabotage groups. Russian reconnaissance teams have reportedly already been spotted operating even inside Sloviansk itself. That does not necessarily indicate control of the city. Their primary mission is intelligence, gathering and identifying weak points in the defense. Behind them come small assault teams, operating in pairs and groups of 3. Only after that do the larger forces move in to secure captured positions. At this stage, the assault units are pushing steadily toward Kramatorsk. We will have to see how far they manage to advance. Overall, however, the Russian offensive across Donbass makes it increasingly difficult for Ukraine to transfer significant reinforcements to the forces defending Zaporizhzhia. At the same time, Russian forces continue advancing in the Sumy direction. According to current reports, they are now roughly 10 to 15 kilometers from the city of Sumy. Fighting has already reached the forests leading toward the city. Those forests extend almost all the way to Sumy's outskirts. It is entirely possible that Russian troops will eventually reach those outer defensive areas. Perhaps the most serious development, however, is the fighting around Belyae Kolodias in eastern Kharkiv Oblast. Reports indicate that Russian forces have broken through Ukrainian defenses from two directions and have effectively placed the settlement in a pincer movement. If that situation remains unchanged, the fall of Belyae Kolodias may become only a matter of time.